1942, America didn't just go to war. It went shopping for victory, not on a battlefield, on payday, for war bonds, for the kind of patriotism you could afford in small pieces. Because the genius wasn't asking for one big sacrifice. It was teaching a habit of saving, a habit of showing up and hitting the number. And that habit didn't start in a speech. It started on factory walls with posters. That sounded simple. Loose lips sink ships. Buy bonds, carpool, count rivets, until an ordinary woman on a night shift realized the war wasn't just overseas. It was in her hands, in her paycheck, in her mouth, in the rhythm of a rivet gun. This is the story of how patriotism became a savings product, and how 1,000 small choices helped build the machines that ended a world war. It's summer 1942. A whistle pierces the night at the Roar aircraft plant near San Diego, and hot air spills out carrying the smell of aluminum. Elinor Otto is 23, a single mom with rent due Friday, grease staining the cuffs of a borrowed jacket. She stares at the quota board on the wall and struggles to read the numbers. Above it, a poster catches her eye, a sailor's cap in silhouette with 4 red words. Loose lips sink ships. During break, the foreman wheels in an old projector. People drift toward folding chairs as a black and white film flickers to life. It's called Mr. Blabbermouth, a comedian with an enormous mouth literally sinking ships through gossip. A guy in the back laughs too loud and cracks a joke. "We're riveting, not running the Navy," a few people snicker. But then the foreman, arms crossed, says something that kills the laughter. Save the wisecracks for payday. We all know someone over there. The projector ticks. On screen, a torpedo cuts through water. In the silence, someone swallows hard. This isn't just a story about posters and propaganda. It's about how they turned into habits and how ordinary women on factory floors quietly helped win a world war. The bell sends everyone back to work, rivet guns kick to life, and the compressor's thud settles into their bones. Elinor finds her rhythm with her bucker partner on the other side of the skin. Bang, clack, tiny sparks stinging her wrists. A guy nearby keeps talking in half whispers about the Navy losing a carrier, spreading rumors, his cousin told him. She doesn't answer. Instead, she keeps her eyes on the chalk line, lines up the gun, and drives the next rivet home. The foreman calls out, "Keep your mouths shut and your hands moving." As the shift wears on and the panel fills, something shifts inside her. The poster is still there when they clock out past midnight, paper bright against concrete. She looks at it twice. By dawn, the city runs on ration books and war talk. The bus is late, the carpool half full. A sign at the stop says, "When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler," with the ugliest cartoon passenger imaginable. People laugh. Elinor squeezes into the backseat with 2 other women and a lunch pail wedged between her knees. Nobody complains. One woman just says, "We'll manage." At lunch, someone from the office waves bond pledge forms, saying, "It's not charity, it's an investment." A kid from the machine shop signs right away. A welder with singed eyebrows shakes his head, then takes the pen anyway. Elinor thinks about the envelope on her kitchen table and how tight the numbers are. She thinks about the guy in the movie going down with his own mouth. "Fine," she says, writing her name. "Just a stamp book for now." When she peels off that first stamp and smooths it into place, it feels like sliding a small piece of fear into a drawer and closing it. Why all the posters? The rumor guy asks that night, his tone softer now. "You think one piece of paper can sink us?" The foreman points at the radio on the shelf. "Paper's not the point. Habit is. A habit of shutting up. A habit of showing up. A habit of counting rivets and hitting the number even when your fingers hurt." Elinor hates that he's right, but she starts counting anyway, whispering totals as the line moves. 30, 60, 110, until the bell cuts the air again. By spring, everything feels rationed. The grocer keeps a ledger under the counter with coffee points scratched in pencil. On payday, the USO booth hands out cookies and a clipboard asking everyone to write letters. A chalkboard at the gate shows the previous week's bond total in massive numbers, bigger than Elinor thought possible. The rumor guy sees it and says nothing. He's counting too. Carpooling gets easier now that people plan ahead and pin postcards to a corkboard with messages like, Leaves 6:40, room for two. More posters cover the factory floor until the wall looks like a chorus. Loose lips. Save gas. Buy bonds. Report hazards. A safety talk ends with a photograph of a burned hand. Don't be that hand, the foreman says. Nobody laughs. Here's how riveting actually works. A dull aluminum cylinder gets pushed through a hole from Elinor's side. On the other side, her partner, sometimes a girl just out of high school, sometimes a gray-haired man, holds a heavy bucking bar. When Elinor squeezes the trigger, the gun hammers the head while the bucker pushes back. In about 2 seconds, the metal mushrooms and locks. In 20 seconds, your forearm aches. In about 20 minutes, sweat boils under your sleeves, and the gun's chatter lives in your jaw. When both people sync up, the noise is almost musical. When they don't, the skin dents wrong and the foreman shakes his head. Done right. The plane holds together in the sky. 200 today, Elinor mutters late one shift, like she's praying to numbers. She hits it. The bell sounds. The skeptic, the same guy who used to mutter rumors, wipes his face and says quietly, "Didn't think we'd make that." The foreman tucks his clipboard under his arm and claps once. Nobody talk about ships. Talk about counts. Outside, that same cartoon, Hitler rides in countless minds on the drive home, and traffic organizes itself into carpool lines. The habit sticks. Out in Wichita, a 17-year-old named Connie Palacioz pulls on leather gloves way too big for her hands. She's maybe bent the truth a little, or at least not mentioned how much her hands shake when she's nervous. The jig for the B-29 nose section curves like a silver whale's front, lined with holes and chalk marks. Above it hangs that same warning. Loose lips sink ships. A supervisor points at today's quota. "Ready?" he asks. "Yes, sir," she says. The first hour is mistakes. Her bucker is a farm boy who won't meet her eyes, and they learn each other's timing by missing. Things improve by hour 2. An older woman, 2 stations over, holds up a palm shiny with callus and says, "You'll toughen up. You'll forget about your hands and remember the number." Connie doesn't want to be a number, but then she glances at the board and finds herself wanting to beat it anyway. The foreman checks back and nods once. "Good," he says. At lunch, a line coils toward a table of bond booklets. The volunteer's voice is proud but tired. Over 80 million Americans are buying in. Don't be the one that isn't. Connie thinks about her paycheck and the shoes she's needed since February. "I can do the stamps," she says. It's something. When the bell calls them back, Connie and her bucker line up the first rivet of the afternoon. The gun kicks, the bar pushes back, the aluminum holds. By Friday, they're close to the quota, and the nose section gleams where they've wiped it clean. "Last row," the boy says, surprise in his voice. They don't cheer. They set the final 5 rivets and hand their work to the inspector with both hands. He says, "Fine, the way men who don't want to show too much say it." Connie takes off her gloves and sees new blisters, and somehow feels taller anyway. Walking home at dusk, the factory's glow paints the clouds. She has this week's bond stamp in her pocket and a thought she hasn't let herself have before. Maybe I belong here. It's 1942 in Alameda. A bandana keeps dark hair out of the way while a lathe runs steady, the kind of machine noise that makes voices meet in the middle. Naomi Parker leans into her work with focus. A naval photographer frames a shot. It's just work. She smiles without meaning to. The day moves on like nothing happened. The famous poster, "We can do it," isn't a government order. It's a pep talk stamped with a company logo, hung where the quotas live. It lifts your chin and catches your attention. But posters don't stay where you put them. They get torn down and pinned up somewhere else. Photographs get filed away and come back out as the country hunts for images to tell itself a story it can carry through the long nights. Decades later, in a reunion hall under softer lights, Naomi walks past a panel about Rosie the Riveter. There's a photo she recognizes immediately, down to the bandana and the angle of her jaw. But the caption gives the credit to someone else. She tilts her head. "That's me," she says to the room, almost apologizing for making the claim. The air changes. The correction doesn't happen overnight. A professor named James Kimball follows the trail, patient as someone measuring twice before cutting once. He brings the photos, points to the lathe guard, the bandana print, The date stamp, the error made sense, he says. But it's still an error. The evidence sits in front of everyone, and they see it. Reporters write it down. Naomi laughs, embarrassed and delighted, and says, "The women of this country need icons. If they think I'm one, I'm happy." A face that lived inside a factory steps into its own story. A factory pet poster ends up everywhere, on lunchboxes, museum walls, because scarcity creates hunger. During the war, you saw what the company wanted you to see. After, the country wanted a simple memory it could hold and repeat. A catchy slogan beats a long story. A bright bandana beats a spreadsheet. A design meant as an internal pep talk becomes public property. The worker who didn't know it existed becomes its living link. Somewhere in this story, Elinor keeps counting. Somewhere Connie's hands harden into tools. The skeptic with the laugh lowers his voice and says, "I didn't think posters mattered. Maybe they just matter now." He shrugs and bites into an apple like it's nothing. In that shrug lives the heart of the whole campaign. Not a sudden conversion, but a drift with a current underneath. So steady you only notice looking back at where it carried you. Late May 1945. A pier bristles with flags as a dark hull slides past with the smell of tar and salt. U-505 looks like a scar the ocean got tired of carrying. Sailors throw lines, bands tune up, and a rope barrier blooms along the edge as the crowd presses close. The size hits you first, then the feeling that you're looking at something with teeth knocked out. A banner blazes War Bond Rally, and loudspeakers crackle with a man born with a microphone in his hand. "Buy a bond," he calls. "Bring him home." The booth takes dollars and turns them into a small book or a certificate with a seal that catches sunlight. A mother with a stroller nods. "We'll do it." A boy stares at the deck gun like it might look back. The Navy builds the day like a parade with a cash register at the end. Elinor stands in a crowd like this with a friend from her shift. She didn't plan on buying more bonds. But then the band swings into Anchor's Alley, and the whole throws back every note twice as loud, and the loudspeaker guy says, "One more bond pays for one more seat home." Her friend looks at her without saying anything. They both sign. The man tears off the receipts and says, "Thank you, ladies." The skeptic is there too, further back, hands in pockets. When the fireworks go off and red light washes the harbor, he claps anyway. "Fine," he says into the noise. When he goes back to work, he doesn't mention the submarine. He just works. The money's real. It's a train that moves. Bonds buy aluminum, rubber, steel, bent into frames, the time it takes to train hands. When people say, "I bought a bond," what they're really buying is the right to believe that what they do at a bench is connected to a ship leaving a pier with their neighbors on it. The connection is real enough to stand on. Boeing's floor smells like fresh paint and oil. Light cuts a bright rectangle through the ceiling. A line foreman writes a number on a chalkboard and circles it, approximately 5,000. Mae Krier stands in coveralls, spotted white from primer mist. Cameras crowd one end, and the bomber's nose shines like a polished coin. The loudspeaker cracks. "Ladies and gentlemen, the 5,000th B-17 from this plant." Someone cheers early, and then everyone does. When a big airframe rolls forward into its own shadow, the skill underneath matters. The fact that a factory can put out heavy bombers at a pace that once sounded like boasting now sounds like routine. That comes from jigs that hold skins so you can hit the same hole at the same angle at the same speed every time. Jigs and timing and teams that learn each other's rhythm until hundreds of hands move like one. There's genius here, but it's the dull kind, the kind that looks like patience. Patience scaled up becomes speed. A manager says a few words, then someone calls for names on the nose, and a girl with a grin like a dare steps forward. It's Mae. Her Sharpie squeaks as she writes Krier, and the letters look like they'll still be there when the plane is just a story. A camera flashes and leaves a white rectangle blinking in her eyes. She laughs and wipes her hands on her thighs. "Back to it," she says to no one. "Production is a drum, not a trumpet blast. One plane becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes a row. A statistic becomes a shadow passing over a neighborhood on its way to a runway, then over water, then over a war." The teenagers who set rivets look up when they hear that shadow and think, "I touched that." It's not arrogance, it's a connection. It's the line between a poster on a wall and a machine across an ocean that doesn't fall apart when it gets hit. The skeptic visits a cousin on leave and hears a pilot say something blunt. Whatever you're doing back there, don't stop. He repeats it the next week by the time clock, and it sounds different in his mouth. Others don't say anything, but a couple nod at him, at the clock, at the number they plan to hit, whether anyone notices or not. Real pride is quiet. Then the notices arrive between shifts. The bulletin board looks normal until suddenly it doesn't, and the hallway seems to narrow. Elinor reads it long enough for 3 other people to read it and leave and come back with someone else. We thank you for your service. Effective immediately. As veterans return. It's not cruel. It's just a decision made in a room without grease on the floor. She reads it twice and touches the corner of the sheet, then pulls her hand back like it's hot. At her locker, she empties out small things, gloves, a broken pencil, a ribbon someone tied to a handle during a bond drive. The foreman shakes her hand and doesn't say much because he doesn't need to. She does. It's time the men got their jobs back, she says, and she means it and feels something tear a little and doesn't cry. The skeptic says, "You did good," like a secret. She says, "So did you." It happens fast because the same committees that set quotas know how to stop them. Demobilization is itself a machine. Ship schedules, discharge points, train timetables, factory orders, clipped shorter and then clipped again. You can't taper a war slowly without tripping over your own feet, so you pull hard on the brake and the energy goes somewhere. The women who couldn't buy cars in 1943 now stand under dealership banners that say, "Welcome home." Some find work elsewhere, some don't. When asked later to tell the story, they say, "We didn't think we were doing anything important. We just knew we had to." Elinor walks out carrying a box that isn't heavy. The posters are still up. Loose Lips looks like it's already thinking about coming down. When the whistle blows for the next shift, she isn't in that group anymore, and the sound lands differently in her chest. At home, she sets the box next to the envelope where she kept bond stamps, boils coffee, and it tastes worse than usual, like water from a hose. She sits at the table and lets her shoulders fall, then gets up and wipes the counter and starts dinner. The habit still thinks it has a job. In Wichita, Connie helps a neighbor find work that doesn't smell like paint. In Alameda, the photo in the bandana waits like a seed that doesn't know it's spring. The war ends without asking if anyone's ready to stop being part of it. Across the country, a hangar door opens, and light lays a long stripe across the aluminum skin of B-29. Doc. Connie Palacioz runs her palm along a seam and feels for roughness the way you check a scar after it heals. Time isn't an enemy here, it's glue. The teenagers who built the ship are old, the plane is new again, and there's a rightness to that. At a kitchen table in Southern California, Elinor Otto's coffee tastes better now. It took time. She still hates being told what to do. She still counts sometimes, for no reason anyone would recognize. When a neighbor asks if she misses it, she says, "We did a job." The posters that once flapped by the time clock hang now in an antique shop down the street. Someone buys one and thinks it's cute. That's fine. Things survive for different reasons than they were born. Look at the arc without names and it's a machine. Messages from a new government office. Slogans from clever ad people. Committees, quotas, targets. Through the names, Elinor, Naomi, Connie, Anna Mae, the picture becomes simpler and harder. It's hands learning to do something they didn't know yesterday. It's a laugh turning into a nod. It's a picture finding its owner. The biggest marketing campaign in American history wasn't a trick. It was a mirror angled so that when an ordinary person looked up from a bench and saw herself, she also saw the war and believed the line between them. That belief built airplanes. It bought bonds. It survived the ending. The whistle cuts through the air one last time in your memory and then stops. The work is over. The proof remains.